Yes, boys and girls, every once in a while we find that there are little pieces of evidence that show that there is hope for South Africa. I'm sure you also did the happy dance when you heard the news that the criminal who is responsible for putting our country in a wheelchair will not be allowed to go to Parliament. Before we get into it, I'm Katlego, welcoming you to Citizen Concerned, where we remind you to beware of the Comrades.
This court concludes that Mr. Zuma was convicted of an offence and sentenced to more than 12 months imprisonment for the purposes of Section 47(1)(e) of the Constitution, and is accordingly not eligible to be a member of and not qualified to stand for election to the National Assembly until 5 years have elapsed since the completion of his sentence.
Zuma, the criminal, is not going to be allowed to hold public office, and the law is very clear on that. Have you noticed that there are people who are so corrupt in our politics that they will try to make an issue that is so simple seem like it is very complicated?
We should be extremely cautious before we can ever deny the political rights of anybody. I don't have to tell this court the reasons for that. The mere reason that we have a constitution, the mere reason that we are where we are, is because people were denied political rights. People were denied the right to vote. People were denied the right to stand for political office and to hold office. And the constitution is itself a negation of that. So our courts have said so many times in respect to Section 19 and other rights in the Bill of Rights, whenever there is an opportunity not to infringe those rights, then the court must literally grab it. And we find disturbingly that the attitude of the Electoral Commission in this matter is exactly the opposite. The attitude has been, let's see where we can catch him. And when we do catch him, let's make sure that he doesn't come out alive. That cannot be the attitude of a South African institution, let alone an independent institution whose job it is to ensure that all our Section 19 rights are realized.
We said it all those weeks or months ago, didn't we? Zuma should not be allowed on the ballot and should not be allowed to serve in Parliament, because that would be against the law. Zuma was imprisoned to serve a sentence, and that disqualifies him from holding public office.
Mr. Zuma has left, I've been told. Mr. Zuma had been issued with a summons to be here from Monday to tomorrow, unless he was excused by me. On Tuesday, his lawyers asked me to excuse him for yesterday because he wanted to attend a funeral. I excused him from attending. He has left today without asking me to be excused.
Deputy Chief Justice and Chairperson of the State Capture Commission disappointed. This after former President Jacob Zuma and his legal team walked out of the commission while the inquiry was on a tea break.
And the extent to which Mr. Zuma has attempted to justify his defiance through public statements is of no relevance. The statements were not formally pleaded, so fall to be disregarded. The Constitutional Court can do nothing but conclude that Mr. Zuma is guilty of the crime of contempt of court.
South Africa's top court was clear and scathing in its ruling, declaring that the former President Jacob Zuma was a manipulative liar who'd sought to destroy the rule of law to save his own skin.
No person is above the law, and every person, whatever be her or his rank or condition, is subject to the ordinary realm of the law and amenable to the jurisdiction of its tribunals.
In the past few hours, it's been announced that South Africa's top court has sentenced the former president, Jacob Zuma, to 15 months in jail for contempt of court. It follows his refusal to appear at an anti-corruption inquiry in February.
He did not mince his words, claiming that all citizens are not equal before the law. He believes that he has been singled out and treated unfairly.
Even you and I could have presided over this matter, ladies and gentlemen. What do you think? We don't have law degrees, but the law is clear, yet these politicians try to make it seem like a criminal was a victim. Imagine that.
Zuma argues that the South African law is not fair.
The law in South Africa has eyes. It sees others and arrests them, bring them to court, and with others, it doesn't see them at all, without any reason.
Zuma the lawbreaker was suddenly Zuma the victim. We need to do and be better, South Africa. The Mkhonto Sizwe went about making noise, trying to intimidate the IEC and the nation of South Africa.
No one can stop the will of the people. If the IEC wants to run credible and respectable elections, they must not stop President Zuma.
What does the IEC want in politics? Theirs is just to make people vote. When it comes to who is going to be the next president, it's none of their business.
What even amazes me is the fact that we have people that are called judges. Judges who are getting paid fat salaries, and yet when they were supposed to decide on this issue as the experts who know what the law says, they said Zuma was to be allowed to hold public office.
On the question of eligibility, in the judgment penned by President of the Electoral Court, Judge Dumisani Zondi, with Judge Mutiba, Acting Judge Yakub, and Professors Ntlama Makanya and Puko concurring. Zondi, in his view, found that the sentence that was imposed on Mr. Zuma cannot be said to be a sentence which the Section 47, subsection 1E contemplates, and therefore the Commission erred. Judge Madiba, in her opinion, concurred with the order, but found that the reduction of a sentence by way of remission issued in terms of the President's powers in the Constitution is a lawful intrusion, as the Apex law allows it. And she concludes that the effect of the remission reduced the former President's sentence to 3 months, an argument advanced by the MK party, and for that reason he is not disqualified by Section 47, subsection 1E from the National Assembly membership. Acting Judge Yakub also agreed with the order of the court, but also disagreed with the conclusion that the remission of sentence proclaimed by the President reduced his sentence to 3 months.
The law says if you are sentenced to 12 months or more without the option for a fine, you cannot hold a public office or parliamentary seat until 5 years have passed from when the sentence would have been completed. Zuma was released from prison within 3 months of serving that sentence.
Our breaking news story tonight, former President Jacob Zuma has been placed on medical parole because of ill health. Well, that's according to a statement released by the Department of Correctional Services a short while ago. Mr. Zuma will complete the remainder of his sentence in the system of community corrections, they say. So last month, prison authorities said the former president underwent unspecified surgery and was in hospital.
The condition that President Zuma is in medically is a lot more serious, actually, than most of us would have made it out to be. But we really welcome this development.
Which is not fair at all. What was the excuse? Well, they said the criminal was sick. Zuma, the lawbreaker, sick. Okay, turns out that the courts did not agree with that little trick, so Zuma was ordered back to prison.
According to, the Correctional Services Act, you need to serve about a quarter of your sentence to be able to qualify for normal parole. So the former president served about a month and a half, just under 2 months of his sentence before being granted medical parole.
The Supreme Court of Appeal ruled that former South African President Jacob Zuma has not finished serving his prison sentence yet. On Monday, the court upheld the ruling made in December 2021 that Zuma's release on medical parole in August that year was unlawful and unconstitutional. The courts ruled that the former Commissioner of the Department of Correctional Services, Arthur Fraser, made a mistake when he released Zuma in August last year, despite the Medical Parole Board recommending otherwise. The reasons behind Fraser's decision and Zuma's medical condition remain a mystery.
Don't you love it when the law just works? The judges were doing their best to do their job ethically and punishing criminal behavior.
In 2021, the former president was sentenced to 15 months in jail for defying a ConCourt order to testify at the state capture inquiry. He was released on parole after serving only 2 months. The decision to send him back to jail sparked some protests, mainly in his home province of KwaZulu-Natal, as well as Gauteng. More than 300 people were killed and dozens more were arrested.
So Zuma went back to jail, but instead of serving his sentence within a day of him being in prison, the couch president, who in my humble opinion should be in orange overalls sharing a cell with Zuma, suddenly decided to release prisoners. He released over 16,000 criminals, claiming that it was due to overcrowding in prisons.
There's no regret. We took the decision as we decided that we should move in that direction, and the remission was a generalized remission. It was not specific to him. So when I took the decision, it was not specifically aimed at former President Jacob Zuma. It was a broad decision that affected many other people who needed a remission, and it was being done so that we can reduce the numbers of people in our prisons, because they are burgeoning at the seams. There are too many people in our prisons. So I don't regret that decision. And what is happening with the IEC case is what happens in politics, in state governance issues, and we handle it as we move on.
Strange how this decision to deal with prison overcrowding was taken on the day when Zuma was readmitted to prison to serve his contempt of court sentence. As if we are not going to notice that Zuma was among the criminals that were released soon after he had been ordered to go back to prison. So at first he was sick. The courts say, no, he must go back to prison. But then the couch president released thousands of prisoners, with Zuma, of course, being one of the released prisoners. Imagine that. They were so determined to release Zuma that they even ended up releasing 16,472 criminals to fool us citizens.
South Africa's former president, Jacob Zuma, was admitted to the Escort Correctional Center and released in less than 2 hours. The Correctional Services National Commissioner said Zuma's release was part of a remission program aiming to address prison overcrowding. As pressure from the opposition mounted Friday, authorities and correctional services defended their decision.
And the law must take its course. So the law has taken its course with regards to the former President Zuma. The National Commissioner has taken a decision, and that decision was not interfered with, neither did we meddle with it.
The decision to return Zuma to prison followed a Supreme Court of Appeal judgment which upheld a court ruling that releasing Zuma from jail on medical parole in 2021 was unlawful and unconstitutional. Minister Lamola said the former leader immediately benefited from a remission of non-violent offenders approved by President Ramaphosa.
Myself nor the President did not interfere with the decision of the National Commissioner.
Overcrowding my foot. If there was ever a sign that the couch president is corrupt, that was it. He claims to be against corruption, but anyone who paid attention during those days could see exactly what they were doing. It was obvious, and they were not even ashamed of it. So Zuma the criminal was released because he was sick. The judges reversed that, but he gets released anyway due to being connected to people in high places. And look at him now, dancing around and singing around. What happened to the sickness? We need a serious rescue, South Africa. The ANC is corrupt, the MK party is corrupt, and so is the EFF. They're all from the ANC. The release of MK party Zuma by ANC's Ramaphosa should show us that they are all still in cahoots with each other. How do you expect anything nice to come out of the ANC? The ANC, EFF, Umkhonto we corruption are all the same. As South Africans, we need to wake up and stop the stupid, dull, and childish mentality of falling for what is bad for us. We need to have standards, high standards for people that we call leaders, people we give the power over our nation to. You love Zuma so much that you wanted to put a criminal that destroyed our country into parliament again. You love him so much that you don't want to believe the facts that he did indeed commit a crime and deserved to be sentenced. Some of you wanted him to be president again, as if you forgot everything that he did. No, guys.
Former Public Protector Thuli Madonsela is warning South Africa against voting for corrupt politicians at next month's general elections. Madonsela says if the likes of former President Jacob Zuma were to be brought back to public office, they'd bring the country into total collapse. She says South Africans mustn't forget that Zuma sold the country to the Guptas.
Well, for me, it sounds bizarre as somebody who was in the ANC and knowing that MK is not owned by any person. Just from an ethics point of view, I'm shocked by President Zuma. For us as South Africans, we should not forget that he is a person who has refused to obey the Constitution. We should not forget that he is a person who sold the country to the Guptas and repurposed many of our state entities to do the work and enrich his family and the family of the Guptas. The people of South Africa should not forget that, because if he does come back into power, he will do just that. He will finish that job.
Let us acknowledge the sickness in our nation and do something to remedy it. We need to stop being so ignorant and so foolish, otherwise we will be deserving of the suffering that our politicians have brought on us. Let us stop being emotional about politics and start thinking critically, guys. I mean, if indeed we were a critical thinking, evidence-based nation, how do we justify how and why Jacob Zuma filled up a stadium just a few days ago? I mean, all those people took time out of their day to go and see Zuma the criminal, telling them lies and rubbish that does not build. That was similar to you going to a thief to give you a speech about why you should give him the contract to guard your house. Let's pray for our nation and fellow citizens to see things as they truly are, not as emotions and nostalgia says they are, but as they truly are. Thank God that we have a constitutional court. Thank God we have a constitution. Thank God we still have serious judges.
In respect of the question whether Mr. Zuma was convicted as contemplated in section 47(1), this court finds that there is no difference between a conviction following criminal proceedings and a conviction following civil contempt of court proceedings, since a person is convicted of a criminal offence in respect of both proceedings. Section 47(1)(e) draws no distinction between convictions for civil contempt and other convictions. Therefore, the ordinary meaning of an offence should be given to the word, that it is a criminal offence. It is not for a court to limit the scope of the provision. The section clearly says, convicted of an offence and sentenced to more than 12 months imprisonment without the option of a fine. Mr. Zuma was convicted in that this court found him guilty of the crime of contempt of court. This court concludes that Mr. Zuma was convicted of an offence and sentenced to more than 12 months imprisonment for the purposes of section 47(1)(e) of the Constitution, and is accordingly not eligible to be a member of and not qualified to stand for election to the National Assembly until 5 years have elapsed since the completion of his sentence. In the result, the following order is made. The applicant is granted leave to appeal directly to this court. It is declared that Mr. Zuma was convicted of an offence and sentenced to more than 12-month imprisonment for purposes of Section 47(1)(e) of the Constitution and is accordingly not eligible to be a member of and not qualified to stand for election to the National Assembly until 5 years have elapsed since the completion of his sentence.
Thank God we still have serious judges. If our democratic history tells us anything, it's that ignorant citizens vote for rubbish politicians. With a few days to go until the 29th of May, let's pray for people to not vote based on ignorance, emotions, and nostalgia, but to vote in a way that will lead South Africa to the economical, social, and political greatness it can reach. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Katlego. This is Citizen Concerned, and until next time, beware of the comrades.